Now we are coming to the session 6th, and it's the last session. This is the highlight of the CME. We are the first one in the history of TNIPS to enrich the knowledge and increase the participation of the postgraduate students. Hence, we introduce three short case presentations by three PGs from different institutions. Each one will be presenting a short case from child and adolescent psychiatry in the aspect of phenomenological, diagnostic formulations and management. Each one will be allotted 15 minutes for presentation and 15 minutes for discussions. The moderators will be Dr. V. Jayantini Madam, Professor of Psychiatry, retired, MMC Child Guidance Clinic, ICH and HC, Chennai. And another moderator, Dr. Satyaraj, Professor, Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Unit, CMC Vellore. So now let me invite our organizing Vice Chairman, Dr. Ramanujam, to introduce the moderators and the PGs. Thank you.
It's often a cliche to introduce someone as they don't need any introduction. But in Jayantini Madam's case, it is always the truth. She definitely needs no introduction. But for the formality sake, she is currently the Professor and Health Department of Psychiatry, Chettinad Medical College Research Institute. And she has about 30 years of teaching experience in teaching postgraduate students from psychiatry, pediatrics, internal medicine, and her name is synonymous with child psychiatry in Tamil Nadu, and not only in Tamil Nadu, all over the country. And she worked as Professor of Psychiatry in Madras Medical College, Chennai, and in the Professor and Head of Department of Child Psychiatry, ICH, Chennai. And she has presented numerous papers, chaired sessions, invited speaker in various state, zonal, national and international conferences and CME programs, and she has delivered lectures for various NGOs, public forums, schools and colleges, written articles and in various dailies and periodicals, and her areas of interest include educational psychology, women, mental health and pediatric neuropsychiatry. And for the sake of saving time, I am concluding with this limited introduction. And moving on to our next chairperson, Dr. Satyaraj, Professor and Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Unit, CMC Vellore. She has gracefully accepted our last minute invitation to become the chairperson, and I wholeheartedly thank on behalf of the administrators and the organizers. She is a diplomate of NB, and she also had the fellow. She is also is a fellow of Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, and her areas of interest include infant mental health, childhood trauma, attachment in children, school mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders. She was awarded with the best outgoing student in MBBS and awarded as the Rose Chaco Medal for best outgoing student in MD, and also awarded the Sharada Menon Gold Medal for securing the highest marks in all India level psychiatry in DIPEND, the examinational board. And she was also awarded the Michael Hong Travel Fellowship ASCA PAP 2013. And she has many publications to her credit and presented various research papers in various index journals. And over to the moderators, ma'am.
Very good morning. I'm Dr. Satya from Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Unit, Christian Medical College, Vellore. At the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Shivasailam and Dr. Paneerselvam for giving me this opportunity to be here. And I happened to join a little earlier, so it was nice to see a few of the sessions and very inspirational as well. So thanks a lot, and open to hearing from the PGs. I think one of the main important areas of focus of any CME must be to sort of enrich the learning experiences of postgraduate students. So I think it's a very nice initiative and effort. So all the best, and most probably at the end of the presentation we can have the discussions. Over to Jayantini ma'am. Thank you.
We'll start with the presentation, case presentation. First, I call upon Dr. Usha Nandini. She is a PG. She is doing her postgraduate from Department of Psychiatry, Tirunelveli Medical College.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to one and all present here and online. I'm going to present a case with diagnostic confusion. Before that, I'd like to thank the organizers of the CME for this opportunity. So, my patient is a 15 years old female studying in 10th standard who was from Chennai, brought by her mother with a history of excessively talking to relatives over phone and sleep disturbance for an initial period of 3 weeks, and then had two episodes of possession attacks, followed by that crying spells and inappropriate laughter and childlike behavior in the form of asking her mother to bathe her, dress her, feed her, carry her like a child for a period of 6 months. It was acute in onset, progressive in nature, continuous illness, first episode, and it was the third psychiatric consultation when it came to us. She was apparently normal until 10 months ago, living with her family consisting of her mother, father and younger brother. During the lockdown, she had to take care of her father who was bedridden due to CVA. Mother had to take care of the father's shop and didn't give much attention to the child as before. Her online classes had started and she was not able to manage that and the household works together. Along with that, her grandfather had come home and grandfather and brother kept bullying her while at home. So she used the phone which was provided to her for the online classes. She used that to contact a lot of relatives, which was an unusual behavior from her side because she did not talk much to the relatives in general. And when this started affecting her sleep, her mother took away the phone. Following that, she became worried, refused to take food. She curled up under a blanket and did not mingle with the family members as before. So she was taken to the hospital because it was a COVID time and the COVID workup was done. And in the hospital, she behaved in an aggressive manner and hence she was admitted there. Psychiatrist opinion was obtained and she was provisionally diagnosed as a case of depression with psychotic symptoms and was started on antidepressants and antipsychotics. After discharge, even while on medications, her symptoms did not improve but instead new symptoms appeared. She developed crying spells and said that she was somehow going to die. This was accompanied by instances of inappropriate laughter. Her mother stayed through her with all of these, and she also developed childlike behavior in the form of asking her mother to bathe her, dress her, feed her. She used to show her arms up and ask her to carry her like a child. She's a 15-year-old female. And then she was again brought out from Chennai to her native place for a change. So they consulted a private psychiatrist and the antidepressants were stopped and was prescribed olanzapine and sodium valproate. After 3 weeks on these medications, her sleep and food intake improved and had a history of weight gain, but the other symptoms like the crying spells, inappropriate laughter, childlike behavior and seeking care from mother persisted and hence was referred to our hospital for further management. There was no significant history of any psychotic or persistent mood symptoms, no history of any obsessive compulsive symptoms, no history of any head injury or seizure disorder. There was one episode of bedwetting while on medications, but there was no other history of any incontinence. No significant past history, and apart from the first degree consanguineous marriage in the family, there was no significant family history of any mental illness or missing persons. Birth was normal. Developmentally, her motor milestones were all appropriate acquired at the appropriate ages. Speech was delayed. She started speaking only at 3 years of age, and there was a history of stammering. No other significant history in the developmental. Her school was changed from CBSE to matriculation in 9th standard. She was a child with average academic performance in all subjects except in maths, in which she barely passed with minimum marks. Her interpersonal relationship in school was generally poor. Her teacher's opinion is that she did not mingle with everyone and was a calm and quiet child. She had a feeling of inferiority at school in general. Mother was very overprotective of her, and there is no history of getting into trouble at school or anything like that. Menstrual history, she attained the menarche at 11 years of age. She had regular cycle and she was able to adapt to the pubertal changes well. No history of any significant premenstrual mood symptoms were present. Premorbid temperament, she was shy. She did not mingle easily with others. She was calm and was dependent on her mother. She does not usually talk with neighbors or relatives, so the behavior of talking to relatives over phone was very different from her usual behavior. She had poor frustration tolerance. She used to lock inside her room for a long time when her parents even scolded her. Food and sleep pattern were normal, and social and adaptive functioning was normal. On examination, general and systemic examination were normal. She was brought by her mother. She was dressed appropriately. She was in touch with reality, looked appropriate for her age, cooperative, but she was clinging excessively to her mother. She talked with a childlike lisp, hugged her mother in between the interview, even when something insignificant was asked. She clapped her hand in between the interview, held her hands in the way of praying, and she prayed often in between the interview itself. She gave only tangential and approximate answers to the questions asked. There was no delusions or obsessive thoughts elicited, no disturbance in perception. Mood was fearful, affect was labile, inappropriate and not congruent to her mood. Judgment was impaired and insight was grade 1. She behaved as if she was a small child, but when asked verbally, she did not express herself as a child or any other person. During the interview, she was not able to recall events related to her grandfather's presence at the house. Higher mental functions, consciousness was normal, orientation intact, memory intact, attention and concentration was normal, language fluency, naming, reading was intact, but there was lots of mistakes while writing and she was poor in calculation. General fund of information was fair. Abstract thinking we were not able to do exactly because she was not cooperative for proverb similarities and differences. Clinical psychologist assessment was done, IQ was 90 and VSMS social age was appropriate for her age. SLT assessment was done and dyscalculia was diagnosed. Her blood investigations were all within normal limits. MRI was done. It showed non-specific T2 flare hyperintense signals in bilateral parietal subcortical white matter regions, but it was found to be insignificant. After establishing rapport and talking with her during admission, her symptoms reduced. Her mother was asked to restrict the reinforcement on the childlike behaviors and she improved slowly and started eating and doing her own self-care routines. Then she was discharged with a prophylaxis of risperidone, THP, diazepam and suggested regular follow-up. On a subsequent visit within 15 days, the symptoms of the regressive childlike behavior and crying spells had started returning and hence lithium was added. She responded well and was symptom free for a period of 2 months but had not attained her complete premorbid level of functioning. When school started again recently on January, she was found to be worried and the mother was concerned her previous symptoms might return. And when she came for consultation, we asked her if she did not like to go to school. She gave a conflicting reply of she wants to go to school, but her behavior was in a very dull and worrisome manner as if she didn't want to go to school. Diagnostic formulation, 15-year-old female child with history of excessively talking to relatives over phone, sleep disturbance, possession attacks, crying spells and inappropriate laughter and childlike behavior in the form of asking her mother to bathe her, dress her, feed her and carry her like a child with multiple stressors like online classes, taking care of ill father, being away from mother, bullied by grandfather and brother and difficulty in academics with no significant past or family history, whose symptoms worsened with antidepressant and showed a partial response to antipsychotics with average academic performance and poor performance in mathematics with MSc showing childlike behavior, clinging to mother, giving approximate answers, fearful mood and a labile inappropriate affect with normal IQ and dyscalculia, favoring a differential diagnosis of unspecified dissociative disorder, unspecified bipolar and related disorder and a specific learning disorder with impairment in mathematics, and a differential diagnosis of probably hebephrenic schizophrenia. Regarding the management, there should be a transition from general physician to the psychiatrist. So the explanatory model of the illness should be changed from medical to magico-religious to the psychological model. For in this patient was worked up for fever and COVID because her initial symptoms mimic the generalized tiredness of COVID, and she was also taken for religious treatment when it was not responding to antidepressants. So the model should be changed to a psychological model, and patient generally hangs on to the symptom because something else disturbing them, and in this patient it was the lack of attention from her mother, bullying by brother and grandfather, online classes and bedridden father. So acknowledging the symptoms and underlying issue, giving alternatives like exercises or other techniques as a face-saving measure might help them to come out of the symptom. It is important to explain about the mind-body relationship to the parent and the primary caretaker. Parents tend to go from medical model to the malingering model instead of the psychological model, so this should be carefully addressed. Psychoeducation of the parents, that when we start giving the psychological treatment, there might be worsening of symptoms initially, should be explained beforehand so that it helps the gain better trust of the psychiatrist. because of foreseeing beforehand. And addressing the gains is also important, identifying the primary, secondary and tertiary gain. In this case, it was an escape from online classes, getting away from Chennai to her native place. Secondary gain, care and attention from mother. Each time she behaved like a child, mother tended to her needs and did whatever she asked her to do, like bathe her, feed her, hug her, etc. Tertiary gain, underlying fear of attending classes because she did not perform well, and she is now in 10th standard and her board exams are nearing. She also had dyscalculia. So addressing the gains and bringing about a solution to the underlying cause of anxiety, in this case, she is now started on remedial education for dyscalculia. Thank you.
Hello.
Over to moderators.
Okay. She has given a lot of differential diagnosis, but I would prefer to have, she has gone through a chronic toxic stress for the past 1 year or so. She has mentioned all those things. That's one part of it. It is physical, emotional, social, she was not going out, and academic stress, too many stresses. And the ultimate, when she had a breakdown, she started talking to other people, which is suggestive of a mood disorder, at least transient. First episode, there is no family history of any mood disorder as far as we know. How far the relatives are able to give a good history, we do not know. But whatever it is, the last straw on the camel's back was removal of the mobile, which she was using to communicate her distress to others. Of course, they did it because she was creating problems for others. But the thing is, this led on to a rigorous behavior, which is not uncommon in children and adolescents in our setup. So also the dissociative states, she had both primary and secondary gains. Whatever it is, I would go for a diagnosis of affective disorder. At least the possibility of her decompensating again are quite high, because her pre-morbid personality, they have told about temperamental difficulties, her inferiority feelings, and she's shy, poor interpersonal relationship, low frustration tolerance, and on the other side, the overprotective mother who could not give her any attention of late. So all these things show she is prone for future breakdowns. So what we are going to do is, we have to, as the presenter has mentioned, we have to work through the psychodynamics in detail. This girl has to be seen periodically, at least in a nearby medical college hospital where the psychiatry department functions, and the models for sick behavior should be removed. No reward should be given to the sick role, and no reinforcement should be given. It's very easy to talk than to follow. But we don't have an option. The phenotype appears to be prone for future psychiatric symptomatology. Our role is going to prevent such episodes and promote her mental health. So it's a long drawn affair involving the psychologist or the treating psychiatrist for a few years to make the family to understand and also the girl to understand the issue. I stop here and ask Satya to go ahead and give her opinion. And one more point, she has responded well to lithium. I would prefer lithium than to antipsychotics because of the natural side effects she may be having. She's a young girl, an adolescent. We don't want alopecia due to sodium valproate or hair loss. We don't want amenorrhea. We don't want milk secretion, galactoria. So I would prefer to avoid antipsychotics and also the weight gain, which she has mentioned. I would prefer lithium in this case with working up. In spite of the medication, she did not improve much, but when she was admitted, when she was allowed to talk, allowed to ventilate her feelings, she became better, but again she was symptomatic once she sent home. These things point towards the role for detailed workup and psychotherapy. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. 2-3 things to add. I think the biopsychosocial formulation was done quite well. So this is a 15-year-old girl who's presenting with a mood episode, initially with a lot of depressive symptoms and then went on to manic symptoms. So the diagnosis of a mood disorder and possibly management with lithium, I think, is very straightforward, and there is no difficulties associated with it. But when you're looking at a dissociative disorder, can I ask a few things? So what would you understand from a state of dissociation? A state of dissociation is actually a disruption or a discontinuity with a normal integration, be it of conscious awareness, be it of motor perception, be it of say memory, many of these things, many of these areas. So this child has had a chronic stress for pretty long time and was not able to vocalize this. So as very nicely portrayed in the history, there was a grandfather to who the younger brother was close and was able to communicate his distress. But this child was not heard. So bottling up of emotions, as we have seen in most of the cases, leads to a lot of dissociative symptoms. Now usually when I'm talking to PGs and describing how dissociation happens, when you're explaining a mind-body relationship, there's a nice example you can give. I'm sure most of us understand Tamil. I'll try to explain it in Tamil as well. This dissociative symptom is difficult to get across to parents sometimes, but something like, for example, headache, right? It can be very, very easily sort of somatoform pain or a model like that can be very easily sort of explained to a parent. How there is a medical causes. So when the talavalina, that's a symptom. Naraya causes irukkalam. It can be because of a cough, cold, sinusitis, vision difficulty, or a hearing problem, vestibular problem, or even a brain tumor. So it ellame medical causes. There are also psychological causes. For example, I have problems at work, or I have problems in my home front. Appo I will start having some of these symptoms as a functional symptom which cannot be explained by a physical or a medical cause. So this is where the difficulty happens. I think you very nicely portrayed about how, so the transition from the primary physician or the pediatrician to the psychiatrist, I think, is the most important step. And this doesn't happen. I work in a tertiary care hospital. We get enough and more dissociative disorders or somatoform pains. But what happens is when they are being asked to come to a psychiatric setup, so they get worked up for, say, headache or seizure-like episodes or this regressed behavior. All neuro workup is done, all medical workup is done, everything is normal, and then the pediatrician says, "Avladhaan ellame normal irukku, you go to a psychiatrist." So this handover is very traumatizing for a parent, not only for the child. So what happens is there is a lot of slips between the cup and the lip in cholo. So not all of them who are being referred by the physician or the pediatrician actually reach the child psychiatrist. So that is the difficulty. But if you could communicate, now I have a nice way of saying, so when the computer problems are in that, they can be hardware problems, they can be software problems also. In the logic also, they very nicely understand. So trying to say muscle layo, nerve layo problem is more like a hardware problem, whereas if it is in your emotion, if it is in your feeling, it's more like a software problem. So maybe you have to go and discuss this with a psychiatrist. If it is presented in this way, up to the loss to follow up of the cases in between, I think that's a very nice presentation. One more thing which I'd like to add is tertiary gains when you're able to assess. Usually a tertiary gain is usually primary gain, secondary gain, tertiary gain. Primary gain actually it is because of decrease in anxiety. It's a defense mechanism. Number Freud pati chonona, dissociation is a defense mechanism. Secondary gain is the clear, tangible rewards I get because I'm having this symptom. I'm not I'm not asked to do some work. I'm not going to school, or I'm not being able to do something else. So that is a clear secondary gain. Tertiary gain is usually something like where someone else other than the person having the symptom is benefited. Usually in the case of a child, we say it is the immediate family. So it is very important for the family dynamics. Other assess pandradhukku it is very important because this symptom can maintain a homeostasis in a family. For example, in the kodandhukku indha mari oru problem irundona, suppose there was a discord or father was not coming home regularly or some other case. In this case, father had a CV and was at home. But the child did not get attention. So when it is maintaining a homeostasis, and usually we say the child is a symptom bearer of a family's pathology. So maybe a very detailed assessment of the underlying conflicts and of the family dynamics is very essential for a holistic management. Mood disorder, ma'am Chunamari, I think lithium is a very good choice. That is well maintained, and maintaining on monotherapy with lithium is much, much better than an antipsychotic as well because of the side effect profile. But unless and until, one thing after working with at least enough and more children with dissociation, removing a symptom of dissociation is sometimes easier. But unless and until you give in, how should I say, coping skill or a problem solving skill to the time, it is only a matter of time before the symptom will appear for any other stressor again. So that is very, very essential. So, if the child is walking with a walker or a stick, so this defense is like that, this mechanism is like that. I'm having this dissociative symptom because of so much of underlying distress and conflict and stress. So, நீங்க symptom matram எடுத்துட்டு, if you don't give me something to hold on, then I possibly will develop some other dissociative symptom after some time. So, being able to build the resilience of the child and focus on that is also very essential. So, I think, as I said, focusing on the psychosocial interventions and dissociation, ma'am Chunamari, very regular follow-up, enabling the child to express the emotional distress in the form of emotional symptoms is essential. See, if number Indian setup, that's something I feel ma'am, Jayantini ma'am can definitely add, but what I'm thinking is, if I, for example, even if my child comes and tells me, Amma, I'm feeling a little anxious to go to school today, my immediate thing would say, in anxiety, there is nothing major, you can go, you can tell your teacher you're feeling a little upset or something, and I will not take it seriously. But if my child says, எனக்கு வயித்து வலிக்கிறது or தலை வலிக்கிறது, நான் ஸ்கூலுக்கு போலனா, I will accept it, because here still the acceptance of a physical symptom is much, much stronger than a psychological or an emotional symptom. So that is something, validating the child's inner feelings and emotions and asking the child to express the distress in terms of an emotion or feeling again is very essential, and giving the child that language and the parent being attuned to understand this language. I think both are very, very important. I'm sure ma'am will add to this. Thanks a lot.
Okay. The more you allow the child to talk, whoever the therapist is, and it should be the same therapist, and that therapist should see to it, the adversity quotient in the child is increased. Anyway, life is difficult. She is going to face problems. All of us are facing. She should be helped how to face the problems and how to solve the problems in the end. This is not going to be easy, but the entire family has to be involved in it, including the grandfather, mother and brother, so that the overall outcome will be much better. So it's not the medical treatment alone, lithium alone. It's working out the psychodynamics and helping the child to cope with it. As Satya has said, the resilience should be increased. That is where we are going to gain over other specialties. Thank you.
One more thing to add is always go in for a, usually all of us read about George Engel and biopsychosocial model. One more thing is biopsychosocial spiritual model. The reason is our cultural values and our society here has a lot of spiritual belief as well. So it is not wrong to incorporate that. So once the person is able to identify with something and vocalize the internal distress, many of these problems can be very nicely managed. So ma'am Chunamari, I think it's more of a holistic approach which is needed. Medication management, yes, for the mood disorder, but definitely a lot of psychosocial interventions and support to the family for the dissociative symptoms must be there. And one more thing, when you're sending the child back to school again, do liaise with the school. I would say that how you can do it in a graded way. This online classes is a significant stress for most of the children. How many of us are really comfortable to sort of come online or talk or concentrate or focus, leave alone all the other things. So I think that is also very, very essential. A graded re-entry back into the regular school will also help. Therefore, the stress is managed. ஒரு ஸ்ட்ரெஸ் இனாகுலேஷன் மாதிரி கொஞ்சம் 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 கொஞ்சமா ஒரு பீரியட் அப்புறம் 2 classes அப்புறம் 3 classes அந்த மாதிரி the child is starting to attend, that can also be very nicely averted. Thanks a lot and a very nice presentation. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
One question was asked by Dr. Bhageshri Devi. She has congratulated as a good presentation, and any projective test or psychological measures done other than IQ and
The projective
Yes,
test.
that's a very nice question. So most of the dissociative disorders or somatoform pain, நம்ம சொன்ன மாதிரி the underlying conflict which is basically contributing to the symptomatology has to be addressed. So in children, எப்பவுமே we say sitting across the table and asking how are you feeling, no குழந்தை is going to come and tell you இல்ல எனக்கு ரொம்ப கஷ்டமா இருக்கு, I am feeling distressed because of this. No child is going to open up like that. So in many cases, I think underlying projective test will be very helpful. You can even start with unstructured drawing. You give the child to draw anything. I had a very nice kid who had basically psychogenic aphonia. The child was not at all talking. So symptom removal was done with a lot of face saving measures and the breathe பண்றதுக்கு exercises கொடுத்து நிறைய the child very significantly came out with the symptom. But actually when the underlying stress was looked into, the child actually, one of the doctors, when in the initial part of the symptom, when he actually had a laryngitis and was not able to talk, they have threatened him saying like, director, you're going to get an injection there where you cannot speak in your throat and then you will automatically start speaking. So in his diagram, he had drawn or a doctor figure or a stethoscope, put a cross, and then he was started talking about the distress. So one such thing is play is very useful in children, drawing, giving them an unstructured drawing, whatever they can, allowing the child to write, sentence completion test, more specific things like say you can do a Rorschach, TAT. In children, CAT in children. Children's perception test is a very nice test you can use to find out the underlying distress. Sentence completion is very simple. அதுவும் பண்ணலாம். All these tests are very nice projective tests which can be used in children to assess the underlying conflict. Ma'am will definitely add. Thanks.
Sentence completion test can be done in the clinic itself. If you ask your receptionist or assistant to help the child to do it, they can easily do it. So also expressing through drawings. And once you get the sentence completion test, you learn a lot from it. Not only about the child, about the family, about the teachers, about her future views, everything. That gives you an insight where you are going to start, how you are going to go about, how you are going to help the child to understand the problem, how you can modify the situation or modify the expectations. So I would prefer a sentence completion test in a busy clinic where the clinician can get the help of somebody to do it, or children themselves. 15-year-old girl, she can sit by herself and finish it and give it to you. Thank you.
And last but not the least, one point is as far when you're working with a child or an adolescent, keep them first, keep their interests or emotional needs as a priority. And எப்பவுமே சொல்லுவா, if you're sitting on your table and trying to sort of relate to a child, most of the times it's not very effective, it doesn't happen. Usually we will say, get down to the floor, play with the child, and that is the best way to understand any underlying conflict. This is an adolescent, so ma'am Chonnamari, in this case sentence completion would be more than sort of good for assessing it. A younger child who's not able to express the distress verbally, definitely unstructured play will be very, very useful.
One more thing to add. Can I?
Sure, ma'am. Sorry, Nanu.
No problem, no problem. With adolescents, it's always better to tell them that you are not here to find fault with them or with anybody. You are not here to judge them. You are not going to advise them. You are going to help them. This should be our approach. Once they realize you are on their side, you are not going to judge them at any account, and you are not going to talk about whatever they have said to others. They are willing to talk further, and that makes them feel a little bit comfortable with you. Ultimately, how you approach the child, your facial expression, your gestures, how closely you sit with the child. Being a lady doctor, I can sit with this female near her chair, hold her hand and talk. Of course, a male cannot do it. So, such simple measures go a long way to establish a rapport so the child comes to you happily and ventilate all her problems.
So as non-specific factors in psychotherapy, I think would always be how much you're able to establish a rapport with a child or adolescent, that far the success of your therapy will go. So thanks a lot for the presentation. And if there are any questions, we'll answer. Thanks.
My thanks to the moderators, and one question for the benefit of postgraduates to both the moderators, and for the, does this case exposes the inadequacy in the DSM and ICD in diagnosis? If we see so many unspecified dissociative disorders, especially in Indian settings, especially with regard to dissociative disorders, our postgraduates find it difficult to fit this case into any concrete diagnosis.
So, ma'am, you want to add or start?
No, you are going to answer.
Sure. So I feel, see, the ICD or the DSM is basically a structure or a guideline which gives us a way to diagnose. But it is more what I would say is the eye does not see what the mind does not know. If you're not looking for an underlying distress or sort of a conflict with the child is presenting as a symptom like a functional regression like this 15-year-old did, I think that is where the challenge happens. I would not blame it on the diagnostic systems. I think there are provisions because we do have usually on the clumpers, splitters, usually ICD, DSM, curricular difficulties are there. I'm not denying that. But I think once you're able to look into the difficulty and distress of a dissociation, I don't think diagnosing is a difficulty. The thing is, maybe when there is a very good tertiary care support setup, like for us, where most of the things are done and then they are referred, it is a little easier. But when this person walks into your clinic, when you're in a private practice, for example, with so many different clusters of symptoms, then the most ideal thing would be is, number, typically going back to our PG days and trying to put the symptoms into clusters. Definitely, you'll be able to see clear mood clusters. So one diagnosis according to the hierarchy, definitely initially all of us are taught ICD-10, organistic comes first, substance abuse next, psychosis, then mood disorder, then anxiety disorder, then dissociation. So I am not going to sort of take away the credit of not giving a mood disorder diagnosis just because I have a dissociative disorder. And all of us must understand that following this diagnostic hierarchy is definitely important. She clearly fulfills the criteria for a mood disorder. So there is going to be a comorbid dissociative presentation. And one more thing, having asked, because I just was remembering, trauma and peritraumatic dissociation is something again very important. As ma'am was initially saying about the chronic stress, whether this is a part of a stress-related dissociative symptom also has to be rolled into. So a comorbid diagnosis can be made, and when there is a depressive episode, the possibility of a dissociative symptom as a comorbid disorder is very common. I think we just have to keep our eyes and ears open to differentiate and delineate the symptoms. That is what I would say it is. Thanks a lot. Ma'am will add. Sure.
And we have to consider our socio-cultural factors. In the Western setup, dissociative reactions are common. Some of the books do not even mention about it in child psychiatric books, but it is not so in our setup. You see any number of conversion and its dissociative states. So it's natural. As she has said, you take the guideline from it. You are not going to treat a cluster of symptoms. You are going to help and treat the person. So from that perspective, you gain the knowledge, but apply your knowledge based on your personal experience and the local scenario, so that the person, the patient, I don't want to mention the name patient, the person gets the adequate treatment modalities. We are using the adequate intervention. This is what is more important. This is for the PGs. You make any diagnosis, I'm not worried. As long as you are able to deliver what is supposed to be given to that person, it's more than adequate.
And as ma'am said, not using the term patient, treat the child as a person. I think that is again, all these are basic, how should I say, rules or Bhagavad Gita of child psychiatry. So these are things which we must definitely sort of follow in each of the steps. Like very simple things relating to the child, rapport with the child or the adolescent, all these are going to go a very long way when you're addressing, because prescribing a medication for a mood disorder and ensuring compliance itself needs some amount of rapport. This significantly managing a dissociative disorder, looking into the underlying stresses and conflicts, as ma'am said, it's going to be a longer journey. So the tighter you hold to the child or adolescent to you initially, that bonding will sort of carry a very long way, and the child will be really cooperative for therapy, and you will see a very, very successful treatment outcome at the end of it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Usha, for your excellent presentation, and I am thanking the moderator also. Now I invite Dr. Pannirselvam sir, organizing chairman, to honor the presenter Dr. Usha with a memento. So now we move on to the next. The next presentation is by Dr. J.K. Ajitra. She is an MD postgraduate from Madurai Medical College.
Good morning to one and all present here. I am going to present a case of childhood schizophrenia. So, starting with socio-demographic details, patient is a 12-year-old female child from Madurai who is studying 9th standard. She is living with her parents, low socio-economic status, and she is a Tamil-speaking Muslim. Her informant is parents whose information is reliable, adequate, and consistent. Reason for consultation: patient complaints of poor academic performance, sleep disturbances, remaining withdrawn, smiling to self and muttering to self, irrelevant talk, disinhibited behavior, and poor self-care for the past 2 years, which is insidious in onset, continuous, and it is progressive in nature, and it is the first psychiatric consultation. History of presenting illness: child was apparently normal before 2 years. She had average academics and she was very regular to school, and she mingles with all her peers well. Then, while doing her 7th standard, her academic performance declined. Her homeworks were incomplete. She started scoring low in her tests. She was clumsy in her class and inattentive during her classes, which was informed by her teachers from school to her parents. Meanwhile, she preferred to stay away from her friends and family members and stop playing with her peers, and found to be self-absorbed. She had difficulties in initiating and maintaining sleep. She may remain awake than her usual hours. She woke up in the middle of the night and sat awake for a long time, and found to be staring at the walls, which was noticed by her mother. When her mother inquired, she just smiled inappropriately, which left her mother bewildered. Hence, she was taken to magical religious rituals frequently, as the above symptoms lasted for around 1 year every day. Then she was also found to be laughing to herself continuously during her regular classes and was sent out of the class. She did not give any explanation for her loud laughter most of the times. At occasion, she said that she heard jokes of known people but did not elaborate on it further. She was also found to be muttering continuously at home and school. She also gestured with her hands and behaved like speaking to a person standing in front of her when no one was there. At school, her behavior became inappropriate. She urinated inside classrooms near her desk 2 to 3 times in a day for around 1 week. When her teacher warned her, she was smiling back to her. When her classmates were expressing their disgust, she just laughed at them, hence stopped from schooling by her parents. Later, at her home, her symptoms continued. She was pacing inside, continuously muttering and smiling to herself throughout the day. She also gave irrelevant answers when parents communicated with her, which was not understandable to them. Meanwhile, she attained menarche and did not maintain her menstrual hygiene. She didn't dispose her sanitary napkins properly even after repeated teaching by her mother. She stopped grooming herself and refused to bath and change her dresses. She was persuaded to do all her routine self-care activities. As her symptoms were progressive, she was brought to a government hospital. No history of any suspiciousness or seeing images, no history of any boastful talk or any increased goal-directed activities, hyper-religious or hypersexual behavior. There is no history of pessimistic views or low moods or suicidal wishes or suicidal attempts. There is no history of expressing fearfulness, palpitations, tremors. There is no history of repeated doubts, checking or washing behavior. And there is no history of difficulty in making eye contact, difficulty in communicating or interacting with others, or repetitive movements. There is no history of impulsive behaviors or hyperactivity behavior. There is no regression of milestones or loss of hand skills. There is no history of fever, headache, head injury, vomiting, loss of consciousness, convulsions, or blurring of vision, or any gait disturbances. And there is no history of weight gain or weight loss, constipation, diarrhea, dry skin, or cold intolerance or heat intolerance. Past history, there is no history of previous psychiatric illness or suicidal attempts. There is no significant medical or surgical illness in the past. Family history, she is born of non-consanguineous marriage. She is first child to her parents. She has a younger brother. And there is no significant family history of any neuropsychiatric illness. And there is presence of financial constraints were present in the family. However, she mingled well with her family and sibling. Personal history, birth history, antenatal, she is booked an immunized case. Iron and folic acid is given to the mother during the pregnancy. There is no medical or antenatal complications during the pregnancy of the mother. There is no history of any rashes or fever. Natal history, she is a full-term normal vaginal institutional delivery. She cried immediately after birth, breastfed, and birth weight was approximately 3 kg. Postnatal, there is no history of any jaundice or convulsions or sinuses or birth asphyxia. And developmental history, her gross motor, fine motor and social milestones were normal. Language milestones were delayed. She attained monosyllables by 8 months, bisyllables by 15 months. She spoke one word by 18 months and sentences by 24 months. And she is immunized up to the age. Childhood history, she mingles well with her peers and siblings. She plays with her peers and imaginative play was present. There is no history of any childhood neurotic traits like enuresis, thumb sucking, nail biting or pica. Educational history, she started schooling at 4 years. She is studying 9th standard. She is regular and obedient during her schooling. She had average academics. She passes her subjects and she scores 50% of marks. She is currently dropped out from school due to her illness. Occupational history is nil significant, and menstrual history, she attended menarche 6 months back. She had regular cycles and her last menstrual periods was 2 weeks back. Marital history, she is unmarried. And sexual history, there is no history of any sexual abuse or any history of sexual contacts. Substance history, she is not taking any substances and is nil significant. Temperament, she had average attention span and adaptability and rhythmicity was moderate. Her activity level was low and threshold level was low and intensity of reaction was less. Her emotions and mood were stable and she is moderately distractible and had difficulties on persistent on task. She is slow to warm temperament. On general examination, she is conscious, oriented, mild pallor is present. Her vitals were stable, there is no dysmorphic facial features, there is no neurocutaneous markers, and there is no evidence of KF ring, and thyroid, there is no enlargement. On systemic examination, in CVS, S1, S2 is here, there is no murmur, RS, there is normal vesicular breath sounds is here, per abdomen is soft, CNS, there is no focal neurological deficit, bilateral fundus is normal, and there is no soft neurological signs. On mental status examination, she is conscious, oriented, she is brought to interview by mother, she is dressed and groomed adequate, she is not in touch with reality, gaze contact is made but not maintained. Muttering and smiling to self was present throughout the interview, gesturing was present and rapport is established with difficulty. Her psychomotor activity is normal, talk is irrelevant and coherent, reaction time is variable, quantum tone and rate is normal. In thought, she expressed verbatim that ஃப்ரெண்டு இருக்கா வீட்டில், எங்கே என் புக்கு குளம் இருந்து மூழ்கி போச்சு, பொம்மை காது உடைஞ்சு, நீ ஒரு பேய் ஆவி பாத்தியா, மழை பெய்யுது, பூச்சாண்டி தலையில் நேத்து ரிபன் கட்டினேன், அம்மா கேட்டுக்க எங்க தோசை சாப்பிட சொன்னாங்க, ஃபோன் ரிங்டோன் பாடும், நீ கேட்குறியா சொல்லாத லூசு, பூதம் டிவி பாரு. That is a form she is having loosening of association, and in stream, content and possession it is normal. Perception, hallucinatory behavior is present, but she denied hallucinations. Emote, she subjectively tells nalla irukke, and objectively she is cheerful. Affect, inappropriate smile is present, and it is restricted in range and reactivity. On higher mental functions, attention, she is only able to tell 3-digit forward and 2-digit backward. Attention is impaired. Concentration, she is not able to tell weekdays backwards and do serial subtraction backwards. And concentration is not sustained. She is oriented to time, place and person. On testing memory, she is able to recall the last meal she had. Recent memory is intact. On testing the immediate memory, she is able to tell one word out of 3 unrelated words. Immediate memory is impaired. And remote memory, she is able to tell her date of birth and siblings' date of birth. Remote memory is intact. On testing the intelligence, vocabulary, she is able to name common objects and its parts. Comprehension, she is able to follow simple and complex comments. Calculation, she refused to attempt. General fund of knowledge, she is not able to tell the national bird or animal. She is not able to tell the capital of Tamil Nadu. Abstraction, she is not able to interpret the proverb given, and she is able to tell the similarities, but she is not able to tell the differences. Abstraction is impaired. On testing the judgment, social and personal judgment is impaired. On giving a testing situation, when asked what would she do if a house catches fire, she replied that she would switch off the television. Her judgment is impaired, and inside she denied the illness. Inside is grade 1 now. On quantifying her symptoms, she scored on PANS 63, that is positive symptoms, she scored 18, negative symptoms, she scored 16, and general psychopathology scale, she scored 29. On BPRS, she scored 48, and she was not cooperative for psychometry and IQ assessment. On doing investigation, or all her blood investigation were within normal limits. Her thyroid function is also within normal limits, and MRI brain is normal. So diagnostic formulation, 12-year-old female child who is studying 9th standard, brought by parents with complaints of poor academics, remaining withdrawn, sleep disturbances, smiling and muttering to self, disinhibited behavior and poor self-care for 2 years, which is insidious in onset, continuous and progressive in nature. First psychiatric consultation, has nil significant past and family history. Her language milestones were delayed, currently dropped out from schooling due to her illness. Her temperament was slow to warm up. She also had significant academic, social and personal impairment during the period of the illness. Her general examination has mild pallor and systemic examination is within normal limits. On mental status examination, she has irrelevant talk, smiling to self and muttering to self was present during the interview, and she has formal disturbances like loosening of association, and she has hallucinatory behavior and cheerful and inappropriate affect. Her attention and concentration is impaired with impaired abstraction and impaired judgment, and she is having grade 1 insight. And I'd like to go with differential diagnosis with axis 1 disorganized schizophrenia, and second diagnosis of psychosis unspecified with unspecified mental retardation. Axis 2 is academic, social and personal impairment. Axis 3 low socio-economic background. Coming to the pharmacological management, a risk assessment was done for the patient, whether suicidal harm or harm to others was assessed, and she was worked up for routine investigations, and she was started on tablet risperidone 2 mg/Hs. At 2 weeks, she tolerated the medications and response was present, which was assessed by PANS scale, and she was also monitored for extrapyramidal symptoms and other side effects like metabolic side effects and hyperprolactinemia. And after 2 weeks, she is increased to tablet risperidone 2 mg BD, and she is also regularly monitored. Her body mass index, blood sugar level, and lipid profile has been monitored. And non-pharmacological management, there are a set of non-pharmacological management include psychoeducation, supportive psychotherapy, cognitive remediation therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, family intervention, rehabilitation was there. We educated the family members. We have given psychoeducation to the parents regarding the illness and the cause of the illness. Expressed emotions were addressed to the patient's attenders, and supportive psychotherapy were given. And consideration of re-entry into school is also advised to the parents. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Did she come for review? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She is
Was
coming
the
for
follow-up
review.
done? Did she come for review?
She is coming for review, ma'am. Only during the period of COVID situations, we lost a follow-up for a period of 8 months. And again, she is now on review, ma'am.
Did she continue the medication during that COVID situation?
No, ma'am. She did not continue the medications due to COVID situations, ma'am.
Then what happened?
And her
Did she
symptoms.
relapse? Did the symptoms worsen?
Yes, ma'am. She attained partial remission with the drugs. There was some poor compliance with the drug. Medications was present with the patient due to the low socio-economic status, and also the patients parents were not able to accept the illness. They are having so much stigma that 10-year-old child is having a psychiatric illness. So there is some poor compliance was present. The patient was on risperidone 2 mg BD for a period of 1.5 years, but there was some poor drug compliance was present, and she was defaulted during the COVID situations for a period of 8 months, and now again she has come for a review with there is increase in psychotic symptoms, ma'am.
When she had the drug treatment, did she have amenorrhea?
No, ma'am. She did not get amenorrhea, ma'am.
For how long did she take the treatment regularly?
She is on treatment for 1.5 years, ma'am.
No. For the COVID, during the COVID situation, she did not take the treatment.
Yes, ma'am.
She came to you hardly 1 year ago. That means she would have taken it hardly for 1 or 2 months.
Yes.
During the COVID period, she did not take. She
Yes.
has come back to you for the past 1 or 2 months.
Yes,
only.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Am I not right?
Yes, ma'am.
See, the diagnosis is not at all difficult. Here is an youngster coming with typical symptoms of child schizophrenia, early onset schizophrenia, insidious progress. All the symptoms point to the diagnosis. Diagnosis is not at all difficult. The problem is going to be the management and follow-up. I am worried about the prognosis. You can see the symptomatology in all areas of development. I mean, emotionally, thought disorder-wise, hallucinations, delusions, perceptions-wise, there are problems. The academics also is coming down. And she had aneurysms in the class. Now, how far they are going to accept her? Twice she went back to the school, they didn't want her. The most important thing is to make the parents to realize, number one, she has not come for the treatment. You did write to them, again they did not come. Am I right? This is what you told me.
Yes, ma'am.
That means she is in a rural area near Usilambatti. She may not continue the treatment. You may have to ask the DMHP people to take over and given medicines regularly. If she is going to refuse the medication, you have to go in for a long-acting injectable antipsychotic, preferably zolpidem. Others are expensive. They may not be able to buy. They may not continue the medication. And being a young girl, you should be aware of the side effects of our antipsychotics. And naturally, parents will be more worried about the side effects than the condition. They may go in for magico-religious treatment. Let them go, but let them continue this. And the parents have to understand that the biological condition, diabetes or hypertension, is a long-term treatment, but they have to come regularly so that you can help them. You can put them on minimal medication with less side effects and see to it that the girl is kept occupied. Whether she goes back to the school or not, I cannot tell right now because the school didn't want her twice. So they may keep her in the house. She should be allowed to socialize at least within the family. Socio-cultural factors have to be taken into consideration. She is a Muslim girl, 15 years, coming from a rural area, and there should be adequate interaction between the child, the girl and the family. They should not just allow her to regress into herself, to go into herself. She can withdraw into herself, and she should be encouraged to also do activities. All these things have to be considered, and constant follow-up. Each time you have got to talk to the family, you have got to tell them how to go about, and the importance of continuing the medication, because the prognosis already does not appear to be that good. Whatever we can do, however much we can help this child to function, and the functional might be recovery, may not recovery. I have a feeling this is going to be chronic. So in what way you can help the child and family is more important, and see to it at least the local psychiatrist is in touch with the family, or the family should be in touch with the local DMHP psychiatrist. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I now ask Satya to go ahead.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, ma'am. Thanks, Ajitra. That was a nice presentation. How comfortable were you to make a diagnosis of childhood onset schizophrenia?
I was, it is a very rare disorder, ma'am.
How often do we see it?
I have seen only one case, that is only this case I have seen, ma'am.
Correct. Is it early onset or is it very early onset?
It is very early onset, ma'am.
Right. So 18 years early onset, less than 13 we call it very early onset, and for early schizophrenia and psychotic disorders, as I said, the prevalence is less than 0.4%. Right. So you're looking, as ma'am said, there are, I would like you to conceptualize this case in two ways. One is the diagnostic challenges, right? So there is a cluster of symptoms. There is some disorganized behavior, hallucinatory behavior, deterioration in cognitive functioning, academic deterioration, and some odd behaviors as well. So this symptom, insidious onset in a girl, and you didn't tell me any family history, right?
Yes, ma'am. No family
Yes.
history.
So when you're looking at such a presentation, right, before you go on to a diagnosis of an early onset schizophrenia, what are the differentials you think of? I was very keen to know that.
Yes, ma'am.
From an academic point of view, what are the things you're going to look at?
Yes, ma'am. First, any autism spectrum disorder that should be ruled out.
Right, okay.
But this patient is not having the any interaction difficulties or any communication difficulties, which was
So any neurodevelopmental disorders, and then as we always go in psychiatry, as I was talking for the earlier case also, we have something known as a hierarchy in diagnosis. So the first thing, early onset disorganized behavior, have you ruled out all organic causes? Has there been a nutritional screen done? Has there been a screen for other neurometabolic causes? Right? Has there been, you told me about substance use and you said that was not there. Okay, what are the common psychiatric differential diagnosis for a disorganized behavior otherwise? So have a template in your mind. Then you would be more comfortable when you're going through the checklist and saying, no, nothing major organic, coming to substance use, no, there is no substance use. Yes, there is a cluster of psychotic symptoms. Where do I put this cluster? Once you're able to sort of conceptualize it like this and go through something like a checklist, your diagnostic part will be very easy. As ma'am said, the first challenge is done, right? The second challenge is management. In management, what are you going to look at? You're going to look at certain things where you're going to sort of do certain assessments and then drug treatment or pharmacological, non-pharmacological management. In the assessment, you did tell me about PANS. I did see a slide on PANS. As ma'am was asking, what is the maximum duration of treatment? What is the level of improvement in the sense of clinical improvement and as well as a decrease in PANS scores? Once you mention that, we get a clearer idea as to how long the treatment has been there and what has been the maximum benefit with 4 milligrams risperidone. The reason I'm saying is, as ma'am was talking to you about compliance of medication, I think this is going to be very challenging in this case. So if they are going to be lost to follow up to a walk-in setup like a hospital, then how are we going to get the community mental health teams being involved in ensuring a long-term adequate care? Right. Is there any significance between untreated psychosis and prognostication?
So the duration of untreated psychosis, when it is longer, the treatment will be worse. The treatment response will be worse.
Very good. So that is something you will have to understand. You've started, you gave some medicines, they were lost to follow for various reasons. So again, in the form of how are you going to rationalize it? Right? Even a 2 milligram BD risperidone would be very difficult for me, whereas a single day dose where I'm able to manage it is one first step towards ensuring compliance. And then, as ma'am very clearly highlighted, are you going to look in terms of a depot preparation? If so, what is the most economically feasible, easily accessible in the government setup? How will I be able to deliver the care? There are multiple ways you can do it, but how is effective provision of service going to happen? So these would be the diagnostic challenges in this case. The other thing, one more thing I wanted to add to your management plan is definitely go for a social skills training also. So that also is very, very essential. And graded re-entry into school, you had mentioned, there's going to be a lot of difficulty for this child to reintegrate into the school system because of many reasons, because of the stigma associated with the illness per se, because of the difficulty she had in the school because of this presentation. So all this has to be had in mind and very clearly sort of ironed out before you can let the child go back. Otherwise, it's going to be more like a revolving door phenomenon for this child, because she goes to school, they chuck her back, again she goes, and then she's not accepted. She might not try again. So when you're looking at it, please tie up the ends and then ensure that she's able to sort of attend school. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. And of course, it's always good to, it's a very nice presentation you've done. It's a good sort of exam presentation. One more thing you possibly could get, how should I say, distinction scores are add-on prognostication factors, right? So what are the good prognostic factors in this case? Female gender, yes, good. But good premorbid functioning, yes, no. There is, she didn't have a rapid onset. Unfortunately, she had an insidious onset of symptoms. So that is a poor prognostic factor, right? And of course, presence of positive symptoms. There are no mood symptoms in this case. So more of negative symptoms were there. So all these things will give you an idea as to prognosticate. As I said, because you have an idea as this is going to be one of the children who's going to be possibly moving on into a schizophrenia with a longer duration, initially not treated for some time with a lot of residual deficits, because it's happening in the developmental phase of the child. So these are the few issues where you have to more closely tie up. And I think it was a very good presentation. Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
One more thing I would like to add. Her IQ, you said it's 90, it's okay. If possible, let her go to a women's self-help group. That is going to be a vocational training for her. Catch hold of the person who is running it. Ask them to help this girl because she has problems. So she can be trained in doing something. She need not be sitting at home all the 24 hours, going into her own world. At the same time, she is going to be with other people. She is going to learn something or other, and which can be continued in the coming years. So in the rural area, let us see what best we can do with the available resources. So one is state mental, our district mental health practitioner. Another one is women's self-help group. For all these things, you get and help the girl in the long run. Okay?
Dr. Satya ma'am, you can continue. Yeah, I think she's having some technical problem.
Yeah, I think she was having a network issue. No worries. So the other thing I was trying to tell you is, please, whenever this is a very rare presentation. It is a very nice case to learn from. So do we have guidelines for early onset schizophrenia and management?
Yes, ma'am.
These are some questions which you would normally get asked in a examination setup also from a PG academic perspective. right? Anything you're aware of?
Yes, ma'am. It is American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Guidelines is present.
Yes, Panambur.
There is a 10 recommendation that has been given for management of the patient, ma'am.
Correct. அது AACAP guidelines irukku, NICE guidelines irukku, Maudsley guidelines irukku. We have a lot of guidelines, right? Australian Royal College guidelines are there for early onset schizophrenia, yes. But I always would ask our PGs to go through our guidelines as well, right? There is, it's a very nice clinical practice guidelines for management of early onset schizophrenia in children and adolescents by Dr. Sandeep Grover. Please go through it, 2019 article. It is in the IJP. It is a landmark study. I think we must always know our clinical practice guidelines as well. So that is very important. And management, when you're talking about it, do mention about always your treatment in phases. Say for acute control, why you chose a particular drug, right? Yes, you chose risperidone. I'm not going to argue with you on that as to why you chose risperidone, right? But you, if you justify yourself, for example, I chose this because of this symptom profile, because of this side effect profile, I would prefer this. Then you're clear. No one is going to sort of, they would say, ah, yeah, this girl really knows what she's talking about. So that way, always acute phase, stabilization phase, and maintenance phase. Split your treatment, pharmacological treatment into different things. And when you're talking about psychosocial interventions, yes, you mentioned a lot for the family. You also a lot for the patient, child as such, and also for the family. In family-based interventions, how you can address the E, because this concept has been spoken in multiple settings, right? So the expressed emotions and how that can be managed also can be discussed. So these would give you basically all your higher scores when you're discussing a problem. And when you're talking about treatment onset, early onset schizophrenia treatment, one more study, there are multiple meta-analysis and there is a Cochrane review as well. So you can go through that evidence base by Harvey et al. Is there, Datta et al. In 2014. So there are multiple articles you can go through, right? So you can mention that as a meta-analysis evidence base. So looking into evidence-based medicine, when you're talking about why you chose a particular thing, you can justify your stand by giving that as well. Otherwise, as I said, it was a nice presentation. All the best. I think ma'am would have connected back. Yes, ma'am.
No. Some
Sure,
problem
ma'am.
there. So
Sure,
no
ma'am.
problem. Let her
Yeah.
continue. And again, childhood schizophrenia need not present with typical symptoms. You may think it's childhood anxiety, you may think it's affective disorder, you may think it's something to do with academics. After a few years, you get the full-fledged symptoms. So better be careful. We should be very, very careful when we are seeing the children or adolescents and have a thorough workup, elicit a history, keep these things in mind. You need not give the diagnosis at that time. Number two, as far as I am concerned, if the child has got delayed speech or deviant speech, I try to be always careful. It's a forerunner for future psychological or academic psychiatric issues. It may lead on to social anxiety, it may lead on to selective mutism or specific learning disabilities, and also to psychotic breakdowns, schizophrenia. So when you go to the schools, when you address the parents or teachers, please tell them, if the child has got delayed speech, better to take the child to the pediatrician or whoever it is, their family physician, and look into it. Unfortunately, in many homes they tell, ஆம்பளை குழந்தை அப்படிதான் இருக்கும், போக போக பேச்சு வந்துரும். But definitely, in majority of instances, there is an impact in later life. Please remember and note it down. When a child or an adolescent come to you, if you have any doubt, just note it down. You need not tell. When they come next time, you can question them in those areas so that you can go in for an early intervention. Promotion of mental health followed by prevention. Then only you are coming to the treatment. So look for promoting mental health. That's where you go to the schools and do all these things, like Preeti has said. Then prevention, you note down all these things. Keep a diary or write it and give it to them. When they come next time, at least you look into it. Okay?
And the other thing is ARMS. Have you heard about it?
Yes, ma'am. At-risk mental state.
Yeah, I think that is also something. Ma'am was talking from a preventive perspective. That is something we have to assess also when there is a prodromal phase which has a prolonged of a vague cluster of symptoms, do have it in mind. These are the children which have to be regularly followed up. So surveillance is very important for this subgroup of children. Are there any evidence base for treatment of ARMS? Yes, there is. So that's the other thing you can look up to as well. These are all additional points, as I said, for you to sort of remember for a holistic management of a child. Anyway, very good presentation and congrats. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, moderators, Dr. Jayantini Madam and Dr. Satya. There are a lot of questions in the chat box. I think we are behind the schedule. And now we can end this session. And I will request the moderators, if you are having time, you can answer the queries. Thank you, Madam. So the questions are, Dr. J has asked a 12-year-old in 9th standard. So what's the age you mentioned in the history?
It is,
12-year?
yes, sir.
9th standard, studying in the 9th
Yes, sir.
standard.
She started schooling by 4th standard, sir.
4 years.
Yes, sir. Sorry, for 4 years.
Now 12 years studying in 9th standard.
Yes, sir. Actually, because of the educational difficulties what they are having, she has been she has been started schooling by 4 years, sir.
Okay.
So when she started schooling, she is on regular to the school. There is no delay in the any of
Usually
the
9th standard, the
Usually
age
ninth
is
standard
14
will be
years.
14 years. 14 years and
That's the
10th
thing.
will be 15. That might be a slip. That's
This is the, then Dr. Srinivasan from Coimbatore, he has asked, what about long-acting haloperidol?
According to guidelines which has been given, according to AICAP guidelines, long-acting injection should not be given to the children. So it is not considered as a first line here, and for the children it is preferred as first line as second line agents are preferred than the first line agents.
So from Dr.
Yeah,
Sugadev,
I think it is first generation antipsychotics are not very preferred. I think that's what you were trying to say is first line and second line. Second generation antipsychotics I think are more preferred in case of children and adolescents because of the side effect profile 1, and definitely you're not going to look at possibility of a depot injection as the first choice. As ma'am said, ma'am had mentioned it because there was a possibility of poor compliance, and if it is continuing, then that is a way to tide over the problem. You don't start a child with a depot antipsychotic. Ma'am can add on, sure. Thanks, ma'am.
In fact, I would prefer aripiprazole if it is available and if it is giving symptom relief for all said and done.
If it's available, affordable and possible, definitely
exactly.
lesser side
What
effect
is
profile is
ideal?
much better.
What is practical, what is possible should always be considered, especially in our setup.
and Dr. Sugadev from Madurai has come up with a novel idea, that is, can we engage school teacher for administrating drugs to improve compliance?
That's a very nice question, sir. We have done it, especially when we have, we usually do it for ADHD medications. Ma'am solvanga because enna methylphenidate, when we have to give 2 doses or something, 1 dose has to be given during the lunch break. So appo vandu we have written specifically to the class teacher to sort of monitor it. So we can do it. But again, it's a double-edged sword. That is my perception or my view of it. Yes, you can write, but definitely the school, knowing that the child has a significant mental illness like this, is going to possibly add on to the stigma and discrimination of the child in the school. That would put me away from doing it. Now, when a single dose, how easily the dosing schedule can be. So I would think in terms of either a OD dose as far as possible, illana a BD dose where the parent itself can monitor and give. That is what I would prefer, but ma'am can add also. Ma'am.
See, in majority of instances, the teachers do go and discuss all these things in the staff room. So when the next teacher comes, they come with a preconceived idea. And again, if other children come to know about it, they can start teasing this child. Even now, teachers do not understand what a mental illness or a psychiatric problem is. The stigma is still there among them, and it may do more harm than good. So it's always better, moreover, We have medication which can be given once a day or twice a day, so it's better. That's what I feel, unless and otherwise is
Needed.
definitely needed. And I don't think we are in that situation.
And from Dr. Angala Tangeshwari, the greatest difficulty in treating this child is in the area of understanding of the illness by illiterate parents and complaints to treatment. And from Dr. Srinivasan, how common is first episode occurrence without family history? So how common
The
is...
problem is, many a time the family itself may not know there is a family history. I have seen any number of family members where one family does not know, the same family, the cousins, they do not even know the other family member is suffering. When you are seeing a lot of people from that family, then every piece fits in. Either they may not know or they may not tell you because of the stigma. We don't ask. We don't know whether there is a family history or not. And again, there may not be a family history.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Dr. Ajitra and the moderators.
My special thanks to the moderator.
I'd like to invite Dr. Sivasailam sir to honor the presenter with a certificate. The third to present the short case will be Dr. Sahana Naharaj, MD postgraduate from CMC Vellore. She'll be connecting through the virtual mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope the screen is visible and I'm audible.
Yes, Sahana, it's all good.
Yes, ma'am. You're visible and you're audible.
Thank you. So I'll be presenting a case mainly to talk about the multimodal management of neurodevelopmental disorders. So I'll be taking an example of a particular child here. So this is a 3 or 9-month-old female child who belongs to a Tamil-speaking Hindu family of middle socioeconomic status, hailing from an urban area. She was born of a 3rd-degree consanguineous union at full term by cesarean section with a birth weight of 2.4 kgs. During the antenatal period, there were certain risk factors like the mother had antenatal thyroid disorder and gestational diabetes mellitus. There was decreased fetal movements reported, and an antenatal ultrasound finding of single umbilical artery was also reported. The child had a feeble birth cry, but there was no history of respiratory distress, abnormal presentation, infections, convulsions or jaundice. She was breastfed for 2.5 years and immunized up to date. The child had global developmental delay. There was delay in the motor, speech, language, personal adaptive and social milestones. There were also some aberrant developmental features such as hyperactivity, stereotypical behaviors which included repetitive vocalizations, repetitive body rocking, toe walking, spinning in circles and preoccupation. There was reports of decreased eye contact and increased sensitivity to light and sound. Other behavioral concerns included self-injurious behaviors such as head banging, and there was also reports of adamancy. The child was unable to indicate even her basic needs or toileting needs. Her sleep was fragmented. She had reduced food intake with specific food preferences as well. This child belonged to an intact nuclear family of a middle socioeconomic status. She had an older sibling, a 6-year-old girl who had typical development. There was family history of alcohol and nicotine dependence in maternal grandfather and late onset psychosis in maternal grandmother. There was no other neuropsychiatric illness in the family. Previous consultations were done for this child elsewhere from the age of 2 years, and she had undergone occupational and speech therapy, although irregularly. She was seen in developmental pediatrics department of CMC Vellore, and she was diagnosed with Cohen's syndrome, failure to thrive, facial dysmorphism, microcephaly, and central hypotonia. And she was referred to our center in child and adolescent psychiatry. There was poor understanding in the family about the child's problems and her needs. The child's mother was especially distressed about the lack of improvement despite various consultations and interventions, and she was experiencing grief related to the child's condition. So with this brief summary of the child, I'd like to take a multi-axis approach to explain the diagnosis for this child. So here we look at axis 1 where the diagnosis is based on the level of intellectual disability with or without the presence of challenging behaviors. Axis 2 focuses on etiological factors. Axis 3 on physical comorbidities. Axis 4 on psychiatric comorbidities, including other neurodevelopmental disorders. Axis 5 looks at psychosocial issues. So for this child, a multi-axial diagnosis was made with an axis 1 diagnosis of severe developmental delay with behavioral problems, axis 2 of third degree consanguinity in parents, antenatal risk factors like thyroid disorders and gestational diabetes mellitus in the mother, Cohen's syndrome, which in itself causes intellectual disability. Axis 3 diagnosis of Cohen's syndrome carries a lot of medical comorbidities with it, failure to thrive, grade 2 malnutrition, and central hypotonia. Axis 4 of overactivity disorder with stereotypic movements. Axis 5, caregiver burden and grief, alcohol and nicotine dependence in maternal grandfather, late onset psychosis in maternal grandmother. So I'll be speaking about the management of each axis separately. So before going into the management per se, I'd like to talk about the management intervention plan that is being followed in CMC Vellore, that is called Nambika Nilayam, which is based on the family intervention model. So the essential features of this family intervention model for neurodevelopmental disorders is that the primary caregiver, usually the mother, is taken as a co-therapist, and the mother is empowered to assess the child and train her child by herself. This is done so as to ensure that there is continuity of care at home, so that the parents are equipped to train their child once they're taken back home. 40 hours of training per week is aimed at, and the family usually feels that they're involved in the care and the assessment and the intervention of the child, and they are better empowered by this model. Now, looking at the components of this family intervention model, we see that the first component is to train the primary caregiver in training the child with intellectual disability. Secondly, we need to address all the family's needs. The intervention model is for 3 months duration. It can either be a residential care program or a daycare basis program. For this child, we had picked a residential care because she lived away from Vellore. And there are 4 specific types of intervention in the Nambika Nilayam model. That is infant stimulation program, autism class, early intervention program, and advanced intervention programs. The different interventions depend on the basic needs of the child as well as the developmental age of the child. So this child was put in the infant stimulation program because of her severe developmental delay and because of her high physical needs. Now coming to the axis management, focusing on the axis 1 management, which looks at level of disability or level of developmental delay. The initial assessment was done using the Jessel developmental scale, which gave a developmental quotient which was below 35. Hence, the diagnosis of severe developmental delay was made. And a Vineland social and adaptive behavior scale assessment was done to get the socio-adaptive age of the child, which was also below 2 years of age. Coming to axis, the other intervention that is done in axis 1 to assess the level of developmental delay. Specifically, we are using the North Carolina curriculum for infants and toddlers with special needs. So this is a type of assessment which is used in initial assessment as well as an interventional guide for us. So it has multiple domains here. If we see, there is a person social domain, there's a cognitive domain, there's a communication domain, there's a fine motor and a gross motor domain. So what happens here is the parents are encouraged by themselves to shade or mark the skills that are already present in the child. So this color difference, if we can appreciate, the initial assessment is done before the starting of therapy, where the parents and the therapist together mark the skills that are already present in the child. And at the end of therapy, a reassessment is again done to see what are the gains that are made in the child in each domain. The other part of the initial assessment would include a speech assessment. Although communication is a part of the Carolina curriculum, a separate speech assessment is also done for children. This is done using the REAL, that is Receptive Expressive Emergent Language Scale, which gives us a receptive language age and an emergent language age. So for this child, both were very poor at 0 to 6 months level. Now coming to the second part of Axis 1, that is the problem behaviors or the challenging behaviors. One guide that we can use is the basic MR, which is the behavioral assessment scales for Indian children with mental retardation. So this provides us a list of problem behaviors, which we can, together with the parent, arrange in a hierarchical way so that the highest problematic behavior can be targeted first. And the target is mainly done using a behavioral analysis model. As the speakers have told in the initial part of today's session, the ABC analysis needs to be done where the antecedent of the behavior and the consequence of the behavior are monitored, and we can try to alter either the antecedent or the consequent behaviors so that the problem behaviors are reduced and more adaptive behaviors are increased. Another method commonly employed is the differential rewarding method. Various regimes of differential rewarding method are used to do the behavioral management of this child. Coming to Axis 2, here the etiological workup was done. The child was referred from developmental pediatrics with already a diagnosis of Cohen syndrome. So we could focus more on the behavioral phenotype of the syndrome so that we could understand the comorbidities in the child and look for what are the most prominent psychiatric comorbidities as well as medical comorbidities due to the syndrome. A medical genetics consult was also done, and genetic counseling was given to the family as the family was not completed yet. The risk of having another child with the same problem or the same syndrome was also discussed with them, and they were advised DNA banking and whole exome sequencing, and they yet to follow up with the same. Coming to the axis 3 management, here we are looking at the medical comorbidities. This involved a liaison with multidisciplinary teams. In CMC being a tertiary center, we have a lot of specialist units also, which are helpful in obtaining this multidisciplinary inputs. So initially, to start off with, the malnutrition of the child, it was addressed by the child health team, where an input on the nutritional status and the requirement of any nutritional supplements was also discussed with them. A diet clinic consult was taken so that a diet chart was made for the child. Pediatric neurologists have also seen the child, evaluated for any neurometabolic or neurodegenerative disorders. MRI brain, MRS, and a karyotyping was done, which was all found to be normal. Because Cohen syndrome is associated with a lot of visual disturbances, and also for all children with neurodevelopmental disorders, special sensory evaluation is a must. Ophthalmology evaluation was done, and it was found to be normal. The child had a lot of physical needs, so a PMR consult was obtained for her hypotonia. She was advised occupational therapy in the infant stimulation program itself for the same. Coming to Axis 4, that is a psychiatric comorbidity. This child was diagnosed with overactivity and stereotypies associated with the severe developmental delay. So the focus here was to improve her communication, to promote socialization, to improve her attention in her tasks during therapy, facilitating appropriate play behaviors by engaging in certain group activities, to reduce her stereotypic behaviors which are interfering with her engagement in therapy. So all these symptoms were initially tried with behavioral techniques, behavioral therapy principles were applied, but the child was not cooperating in the therapy room because of her stereotypic behaviors and inattention. Hence, a low-dose antipsychotic was started for her. Risperidone at 0.25 milligram was added, and the child improved, her attention span improved, and stereotypic behaviors and self-injurious behaviors reduced, and she was more cooperative in therapy. She did not develop any specific side effects to the medication. Although this child did not have the PEPAR assessment, I'd like to point out one assessment that is done in psychiatric comorbidity, specifically in children with autism. This is called the Psychoeducational Profile Revised. So this is a specific assessment done in autistic children because they might not be able to cooperate in the conventional developmental assessment scales. This assessment is done where multiple domains like imitation, perception, eye-hand integration, cognitive, verbal, performance. So multiple domains are checked. And this is also used as a treatment guide or an interventional approach for the therapy of autistic children specifically. Coming to Axis 5, focus on psychosocial issues. This is mainly looked at improving the knowledge, attitude, and practices of the family with regard to the child. So, based knowledge about child's illness, knowledge on general child rearing principles, knowledge about giving more information about intellectual disability or developmental delay. Looking at what is the family's attitudes, what are the positive attitudes or the negative attitudes, and helping them achieve a balance between the two, and looking at what are the expectations of the family members from the child with ID, and is it achievable or is it attainable. So that is something we looked into. And these are certain psychoeducation sessions where there is interactive group sessions going on with all parents of different children, where specific topics of interest are spoken about, and group discussions do happen here. The other part of the psychosocial issues focused on was grief counseling, because this mother specifically was going through a lot of caregiver burden and grief related to the child. Clinical psychologist as well as the psychiatric team spoke with her. She was allowed to ventilate her distress. She was validated, her distress was validated, and she was informed, given more and more psychoeducation. She was helped with her coping as well, to understand the child's condition better and cope with it better. Support groups for her perceived support as well as the actual support was identified, and she was also linked with other parents so that they could have group discussions on the same. And continuity of care, of course, was aimed at, well, looking at regular follow-ups and asking them to follow the same principles at home and come back frequently for regular follow-ups, either via teleconsultations or by coming back by themselves in person. So at the end of this 3-month training, we saw that the child improved in all domains of her development, as assessed by the CCI-TSN. And the speech assessment also showed that there was significant improvement. From 0 to 6 months, the child was actually functioning at almost 12 to 15 months level. And her behavioral issues had significantly reduced. Her feeding problems had subsided and her nutritional status had improved. Her sleep was also better, and parental understanding overall was much better. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sahana, for the presentation. I think it was a very holistic presentation. I'll possibly ask Jayantri ma'am to add first and then I'll start.
Thanks.
Ma'am, do you want to start, ma'am? Okay. So I think ma'am's audio.
Now it's
yes,
coming.
ma'am. Yes,
You
ma'am.
go ahead and do it. I will
Okay.
join later. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. No worries. So I think it's a very nice case example, because we've seen, as far as child psychiatry goes, about the emotional and behavioral side, we had seen 2 cases being presented, and this is from the neurodevelopmental side. And what we have to emphasize is the holistic multidisciplinary team management. And how can that be done effectively? That can be done effectively only with the help of a clear multi-axial diagnosis. So giving the emphasis of a multi-axial care diagnostic plan and management tailored to the needs of the child. It's not like one size fits all. So it is very specifically tailored to the child's needs. For example, in this case, the child had Cohen syndrome, which has certain characteristic features. It's an autosomal recessive condition, which is caused by a COH1 gene. So what happens is there is hypotonia, there is a mild to moderate intellectual disability, mostly severe as well sometimes, and there is a visual abnormalities, facial dysmorphic features, there is neutropenia. So all this constitutes a syndrome like Cohen syndrome. So for instance, when I am trying to manage the intellectual needs of the child alone without looking into the axis 2 or axis 3 or axis 4 and 5, I think then you're not doing a comprehensive job. So addressing the child's cognitive needs in different domains, as I said, cognitive, fine motor, gross motor, social adaptive skills, and language. And working on that is one. So working on the deficit skills is first part of the axis one, and working on the problem behaviors and reduction of the same is the second part of the first axis, like level of intellectual disability or developmental delay with or without behavioral issues would be your axis one. I think the next one, which is very nicely tried to highlight, is look into the etiology. This case, because there were clear dysmorphic features and the child had come through developmental pediatrics, it had already been done. Sometimes in the case of a primary care setup, when there is a mild ID and when there was possibly birth hypoxia or HIE sequelae, how much am I going to invest on moving to look into the etiology has to be decided on a case-to-case basis. Yes, in this case it was very essential, hence it provided a lot of important input even in the terms of prognostication. So we needed to have to sort of complete the etiological workup, and therefore it was very essential and hence done. The third axis is looking again medical comorbidity. All the comorbidities associated with the intellectual disability or the developmental delay per se and with this genetic syndrome also had to be addressed. For example, her visual assessment was done because these children have microphthalmia, they have opacities in the cornea, so they have strabismus and multiple other visual difficulties. So a visual assessment was needed to sort of, suppose you're going to give a stimulation through all your modalities for a cognitive development, and if the child has a visual difficulty, then that sensory input is not going to be very helpful. So basically, to tailor the needs, tailor the interventions to the needs of the child, a holistic medical assessment or a sensory assessment also needs to be done. This child had hypotonia, so definitely the PMR input or the physical medicine input was essential, and I think that was also very well done. Last but not the least, looking into here, I think the child had no major comorbidity except the self-injurious behavior which was there. I think that again, sometimes either it's a part of the overactivity stereotypy cluster or it can be a separate comorbid diagnosis and has to be managed appropriately. And the child was given risperidone, which I think a low dose of risperidone does help in a lot of overactivity and stereotypy, and has been aptly chosen. The last thing, I think we have the advantage of being in a tertiary care center is the multidisciplinary input to address the grief. I think this is something which, because having a child with developmental needs is like, how should I say, chronic drain on the financial, emotional resources of a family. So unless and until it is dealt with in a proper way, I think it is going to be very disheartening for the parent. A one-time grief event, like for instance, even a death of a child, it is a very, very significant life event causing a lot of grief, but there is a resolution because of the closure of the event. But in this case, you're seeing this child living in front of you day in and day out having deficits. And what will happen if I am not there tomorrow is the doubt in most of the parents. And I think that is the major trigger for a grief. So that being addressed is of paramount importance in managing. Therefore, I think the neurodevelopmental axis and the management has been very nicely mentioned. Thanks for that, and we are open to take any questions. Ma'am, you want to add anything?
Yeah. See, for such complicated, complex neurodevelopmental disorders, the ideal one will be initial training in a residential facility, because their mothers are not distracted by the household work or anything. They stay with the child 24 hours a day. During the daytime, they stay in the unit, trained by the trainers, as well as they learn from the other parents. Of course, individually tailored, but general factors also come into play. They discuss among themselves. The grief is comparatively less. They can compare notes. They find out solutions from the other parents than us. So the ideal setting is okay. But after 3 months comes the problem. Then they are there, they get all the facilities, all the inputs, all the benefits. After 3 months, how many people can afford it is one thing. You can't admit everybody. And again, after 3 months comes the problems, for which we should prepare them. there will be a lot of interpersonal issues between husband and wife, between the other normal children and the mother who has to give more attention to this child. Then family life interruptions. The mother may have to keep the child in a place where the facilities are available. She may have to migrate to a semi-urban or urban area. Then economic difficulties, expressed emotions. In many families, still, even now, they tell, இந்த குழந்தைய வச்சுட்டு ஏன் கஷ்டப்படுறேன், என்ன போனா போயிட்டு போகுது, இல்லை என் பிள்ளைக்கு இன்னொரு கல்யாணம் பண்ணி எங்களுக்கு ஒரு நார்மல் சைல்டு வேணும், திரும்பி திரும்பி பையன்கிட்ட இதை சொல்லிக்கிட்டே இருப்பாங்க. இந்த மதர்ஸ் வந்து நானும் இந்த குழந்தைய கொண்டுட்டு நானும் செத்து போயிருந்தா மேடம் பெட்டரா இருக்கும், நீங்க சொன்ன மாதிரி யாரு எனக்கு அப்புறம் பார்க்க போறா, இட்ஸ் பெட்டர் இஃப் போத் ஆஃப் அஸ் டை அண்ட் இட்ஸ் லிவிங் கிரேட் with all sorts of complications, with all sorts of comments and neighbors commenting, இதை கொண்டு போய் ஏதாச்சும் ஒரு அசைலத்தில் விட்டுடேன், or you are responsible for giving birth to this child. All these things are going to happen. So when they are in the facility itself, we have to call the family members, make them to understand the problems the mothers are going through. The child may not know, but the mothers are ones who are going through. I cannot explain their problems. Sometimes you are helpless, you don't know what to do, and you feel so bad because you are not able to do anything. So such things also have to be addressed. Of course, it's not easy. They will say yes, yes. The moment they go back, again the problems start. So periodically they have to come and talk to us for a few minutes, ventilate their problems and go. But there is no other go. They have to live with it. So this is what I would like to tell the PGs. Be empathetic and sympathetic and try to help in whatever way you can. Medically, you can do only a little bit. But in other areas, psychosocial areas, you can, if you can help, please go ahead and do something.
I think that's a very valid point. As ma'am said, I had a child who had actually been coming since the time I was doing my PG, just for 0.25 milligram BD of risperidone from Nagarkoil, traveling overnight in a bus, and then coming here just to collect that medicine. And sort of, the child was 18 years of age, and when we had to transition care to an adult service, they were lost to follow up. They were coming for, I was seeing the child when the child was 3 years old. So about 15 years continuously they were coming, but then once transition, I think that is the difference in management between a child psychiatry and an adult psychiatric facility as well. So most of the things, as ma'am said, are just not medications or interventions. It is a little more than that. So that parent called me and said, ma'am, நான் உங்களை பார்க்கறதுக்காக உங்ககிட்ட பேசுறதுக்காக I was coming. Risperidone அங்க pharmacyலயும் கிடைக்கும். But that was not there. So when that was not there, they stopped coming to the service as such. So sometimes I feel that extra mile and being empathetic to listening to their, how should I say, problems and difficulties, just providing them that, how should I say, very open hearing session. That goes miles and miles. You might not be doing anything, but this works miracles. I think that is one learning point, as ma'am said, we must all understand as therapists and as psychiatrists, just to offer that lending here without any judgment, not looking into your watch, not seeing whether the time is done. I think that goes a very long way. Thanks a lot for that point, Manoj.
In fact, majority of the mothers consider you as a goddess.
Sure.
They come mainly to ventilate their agony. They know pretty well you cannot do anything. But you are giving them, lending them a shoulder to cry. That's what they want. They also know about the problem. They know nothing much can be done. That you can't lead their lives. Everything they know. But they need a person, an understanding person who empathizes with them. Those 20 minutes or 30 minutes is something very valuable for them. With that, they can go on for next 1 month or 2 months. That I would like the PGs to understand. The human touch, the human contact, the humanitarian help counts more in these cases rather than your medical help.
So,
Nobody else is going to do that.
Very true, ma'am. And amma சொன்ன exact words was, ma'am, இப்ப recharge பண்ண மாதிரி இருக்கு, ஒரு 2 months தாங்கும் ma'am, அப்புறம் வரேன். So, exactly. That was very, very effective. Thanks, ma'am. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sahana. I think it was very well presented. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I thank the organizers as well for this opportunity. Thank you.